Good Friday morning. Welcome to the WLBB Community Voice program here on News Talk 1330, FM 106.3, streaming live online at newstalk1330.com. And this morning, you can see us all crowded in the News Talk 1330 studios on the News Talk 1330 Facebook Live. Do appreciate you joining us for what we believe to be a very special program this morning. I'll introduce you to all of our guests here in just a second. Now, we're all aware of the incident in Minnesota involving a police officer and a man named George Floyd. We're all aware of the protesting that followed in the cities around the U.S., the peaceful protests and the violent protests and the looting. And we are aware how police were prepared, and in some cases they were not. Now, fortunately, we've not seen any of the violent protests in West Georgia. That doesn't mean, however, that people are not mad or fed up. But the fact is that so far we've had peaceful protests in West Georgia, and that could say something about our people, our local law enforcement, and how our residents do feel about our local law enforcement. Now, I was contacted last week by one of our guests to bring forward a conversation between the Carroll County NAACP and local law enforcement to discuss what she referred to as a partnership. And it's into making sure that there's good communication between local law enforcement and our minority communities, the efforts that are already in place and efforts that could be put in place. The Carroll County NAACP interested in that, as are community churches and local law enforcement. So today we are going to have that discussion. My name's Colin Worthington. Our panel this morning includes Dominique Conte. She's Political Action Chair for Carroll County NAACP. We have Antioch Baptist Church Pastor Vincent Dortch. And maybe you've seen Vincent on his Facebook page juggling 50-pound weights sometimes in the morning. Carroll County Sheriff Terry Langley sitting to my left, and Carrollton Police Chief Joel Richards is here. And over the telephone this morning, we have James Stocks, who is the Carroll County NAACP president. We appreciate all five of these individuals joining us this morning for this program. And those of you listening and watching at home, we do encourage you to participate on this topic. We're talking about the local concerns. Any local concerns you have, suggestions, I encourage you to visit the News Talk 1330 Facebook page and post those. And we will try and share those and make those part of the conversation this morning. So before we do start this, I would like to give the sheriff and police chief the opportunity to share their feelings on that video that came out from Minneapolis. I believe we're closing in on 2 weeks ago. When you saw that, what were your thoughts seeing a fellow police officer engaged in that?
Well, yeah, no, the thoughts I had is pretty much what I've heard from just about everybody. Initially you're sick at your stomach, but also I had a feeling that I've heard described by a lot of people. I felt like crying because a young man, George Floyd, lost his life at a very a criminal abuse of authority, and it shouldn't have happened by officers. I wanted to cry because of the divide that has been in this country for so long. This was certainly going to keep us divided for some time. That was my fear. But also I wanted to cry because of the decent officers that have a difficult job. This made it more difficult.
Now, Sheriff, that tactic that was used, is that a tactic that should be used?
Absolutely not, and we don't.
All right, Chief Joel Richards, Carrollton Police.
Yeah, so right after it happened, when it was aired, Pastor Dortch and I talked several times a week, and he called me and said, would you please watch this and call me back? And I did, and it's very disgusting, as the sheriff said. There's no other way to put it. It's not even excessive force. It was murder. And it was sickening to watch a man die right before your eyes, and you can see in his eyes as he's just given up on life. And as I said this week in a meeting, I think probably going through his mind was, thank God somebody's recording this so they'll be held accountable for what they're doing.
All right, Dominique Conte is the political, what's your official title here, Dominique?
Political Action
Chair for Carroll County NAACP. You
Yes.
did reach out to me
Yes,
last week, and you wanted to get this conversation, get as much attention to it as you possibly could. What is the conversation that we hope to have today, and what have been your communications with local law enforcement?
Well, what happened when, obviously like everyone else, when we saw the video on social media with George Floyd, I was appalled, angry, frustrated, a whole host of emotions came through me because at the end of the day, before all the accolades and titles, I'm an African-American woman and a mother of two young men that I'm raising myself. So this hit me very close to home. And I reached out to Mr. Stocks, our president for the NAACP, and voiced and vented to him my displeasure with what I was seeing. And this wasn't the first, obviously, murder that was recorded. on social media, it was just enough is enough. I'd had enough. And I wanted to utilize our platform, if you will, as being NAACP chair for political action, to voice our concerns and come up with solutions on how we could move forward as a human nature, not just as a race. So I spoke with Mr. Stocks, and that's why I thought about you. I said we really needed to go on Colin's show because it wasn't about reaching out to our community. Our community are very aware of, unfortunately, the disparage and the police brutality at times that we experience. So it didn't make sense to go to one of our radio stations, if you will, to try to reach out to our listeners because they're very aware. We needed the partnership with our other allies, which you have a broad base of. And that's why I intentionally wanted us to air this conversation to get all aspects and points of view, and hopefully a partnership with law enforcement as well as with our allies in our community base as well, so they can understand where we're coming from as a minority group. When we say Black Lives Matter, we're not saying that all lives doesn't matter. What we're saying is that for whatever reason, Black lives have been disproportionately murdered and abused for over 400 years. So how can we say all lives matter if our life is still taken up as pretty much at this point? The analogy that we use is we feel that in America, if it was a pet that had their, display of the knee on the neck of a pet, of a dog, that they would have gotten more attention than a Black man or a Black woman. And that's concerning to me because we are all equal. We are all human. The equality and inequality in our country, it has grown in the last few years, in my opinion, even more vast than what it has been in the past. And I feel we're going in the wrong direction.
I do want to ask you in a little bit after we talk to law enforcement again, maybe if you learned anything after talking to law enforcement over the past week, maybe you learned some of the things they were doing that you weren't aware of. And we'll talk about that. But Sheriff Terry Langley and Chief Joel Richards, what are some of the things that you guys have been doing in the past several years to build relationships with people of all races in the community? What things have you been part of?
Well, I met Pastor Dorsch about 4.5 years ago, and at that time we were doing a Citizens Police Academy, which we've had since 1997. And I invited him to come out to the firing range one day to see how we train, and he asked if we would host a CPA for clergy, if he would get them there. And I called the sheriff, and the sheriff said, absolutely, let's do this. So we did sit down with Pastor Dortch, and I can't remember who else, and there was about 15 or 20 pastors. And at the end of that, we decided that where do we go from here? Because we built some great relationships, and they did ride-alongs with officers. They went out and they actually took on the role as a police officer and had to answer calls, and 8 out of 10 of them shot a man armed with a set of keys. But they said they'd do it all over again because they in fear of their life. And so we decided, the sheriff and I agreed, that we would host a monthly luncheon at the police department. And we've been doing that for 4.5 years now, and it's grown to anywhere from 20 to when we first started to the last one, I think there were 85. And we'll start back that as soon as we can after this social distancing is allowed again, that we can come together. That we do, we host a joint camp in the summer called Camp Special Forces. The sheriff and I started this in 2009. We celebrated our 10-year anniversary last year. The first one we did, he totally funded it himself because it wasn't in our budget, and it's a camp where kids from all over the county with special needs can come together, and we really pour into the youth. The sheriff does an outdoor camp that I'm sure he'll talk about. We do Shop with a Cop, the sheriff and I do, and this past year we did 112 kids, took them shopping at Walmart and Target and spent about $250 on each one. We partner with DFACS if a kid is taken in foster care and don't have shoes or needs some shoes for school, then we'll have an officer meet them at Hibbett's, and we buy them a pair of shoes. We give away free car seats. We have 2 guys that are certified in how to install them. If you're a single mom or whatever and you need a car seat, you can stop by, fill out a piece of paper, and we provide you a free car seat and install it for you and show you how it's used. There's a number of other things that I may not be thinking about. I'll let the sheriff maybe talk about some.
Well, I think you pretty well covered them. The most important thing is communications, and I think was mentioned right at the get-go. the greatest thing about the pastor's luncheon is Pastor Dortch, Pastor Bell, Pastor Sauls, and it just goes on and on. Mr. Stocks and other people, they know us personally. We break bread together. They have our cell number. And I think over the past 4 or 5 years, there's been issues. There has been some issues. But we've been able to communicate. They have my personal cell phone. They have the chief's personal cell phone. They can call and say, I got a guy in jail and I don't think things are going right. Well, come on up, let's look at it. So that's really helped, and I think it's those incidents that have happened could have festered if we didn't have that relationship. And my hats are off to Chief Richards and Pastor Dortch and all those that had something to do with enhancing communications. And also, it's helped us to be more visible. In the past, people just thought the sheriff, they heard of the sheriff, but they didn't see him. They didn't, you know. So it's helped us to be more approachable and people see me, and we're out with these camps and the kids and the families, and they see us as people, not just as an authority figure that only shows up when when something happens.
I'm due a break here, but I want to keep on to give you two more questions here that are the part of the current topic. When we do have these pastor meetings, and I'll ask you after I ask Sheriff and Joel first. You say for the last 4 years you've had these meetings. Have you learned anything? Have you changed anything? Changed your perspective? Changed any actions? That encouraged different protocol? Based on those meetings, a different approach.
I can just tell you that we're very transparent. There's been times where Pastor Dortch or Mr. Stocks would, if an incident happened in the community, we would bring them in, allow them to watch body cam. There's been times when he had an issue in Villa Rica and he called me and said, "Do you know the chief there?" I called Michael Mansour. We've been friends for a long time, and put him in touch with Pastor Dortch. I think things like that wouldn't have happened without this relationship and the communication.
And Pastor Dortch, before we go to our break, give you an opportunity to talk here about those pastor meetings. How beneficial have they been for you and your community you're representing at these meetings?
The pastors and law and officers meeting that we have monthly has been a great help, I'll say, from a personal standpoint, because it put me in a position as an African-American pastor in the Carroll County where I personally say a great relationship with the officers to stand in the gap on behalf of the community when issues do come up. I love the fact that if Chief and Terry will tell the truth, that we really don't talk verbally. Most of our communication has been just text, and we get it done, resolved as quickly as possible. But I really want to say that even after what happened in Minnesota, one of the first things I did, as Chief Richard said, was called him, because I was afraid that if we didn't have a communication, did not talk with the leaders here in Carrollton, that we could see the same thing happen here. And so one of the first things I did when I called him and said, "Hey, can you sit down with us as pastors, as leaders here in Carroll County, to discuss what happened? And we want to hear from you. Do you believe what happened was right, wrong?" And just be transparent. We just had a pastors meeting by Zoom this Tuesday evening, where we probably had about 25 pastors that was on the Zoom meeting, and we allowed the officers to give us their policy of how they train, things that happen within their department. Because we had a lot of new pastors that have not went through the training that we went through at Citizens Academy, the Citizen Academy class. And what that meeting was initially set up for is to bring knowledge of what the officers do, their policy, but then we turned around and came back last night to open it up for detailed questions within Carroll County, because we know the policy, but what really take place on the street. And that's what we want to do as pastors, wanted Chief and Sheriff Langley to be as transparent, to let us know, okay, as an African-American citizen, if I get stopped, I know you have your policy. I know you're saying that's one of your highest rates as a traffic stop, but I'm sitting there and you walking up to me. What can you do? What can you say to help me to stay calm where things don't escalate, or we see a repeat action that have taken place all over America? So I just want to say to both of them and to the pastors that are working together, thank each and every one of us, because we want to represent Carroll County. We don't want Carroll County to be another place like Minnesota, or any other place. And that's what we've been trying to do through those monthly meetings, allowing the DA to come, other nonprofit organizations to come, people that represents the city. And I think it's been great. As Chief said, we have moved from like 20 to about 80-some people each month. And it gives us the voice to know what's going on in the community. I share this, and I end by saying this, is that my philosophy is if you're not at the table, you don't know what's going on.
This morning's conversation, we don't expect to fix everything in this half hour, but as Conte has told me, I mean, this is just the starting point.
Right.
This is where we want to start the conversation, and we hope it develops into other things on media and social media throughout the coming months. And at some point, we do hope to talk to James Stocks on our program. I know he's listening to us, and we've got him on the phone here, so maybe we'll try and set him up after we return from this very first break. Community Voice brought to you by Tanner Health System and Oak Mountain Academy here on News Talk 1330, FM 106.3, and streaming live online at newstalk1330.com.
As a graduate of Oak Mountain Academy, I've found that my experience on the mountain prepared me beyond all expectations. As a junior at Auburn University, I approached my studies with great confidence thanks to what I learned at OMA. When I think back on my time on the mountain, I think of my teachers. Their genuine love and concern for me as a student was always evident, and now, as an adult, I still foster those relationships. I'm Carly Robinson, an Oak Mountain Academy alum. Visit oakmountain.us to see how you can offer your child an amazing opportunity to be a warrior.
For more than 70 years, you have turned to Tanner Health System for your healthcare needs. As our community moves forward, Tanner is here for you. Strong, safe, and close to home. Routine medical appointments, urgent elective surgeries, and imaging are back on the calendar at our hospitals and Tanner Medical Group practices. With the safety of our patients, staff, and community always our top priority. Learn more at tanner.org. Hashtag We Are Tanner Strong. That's tanner.org. Hashtag We Are Tanner Strong.
It's about 8:47. Community Voice brought to you by Tanner Health System, Oak Mountain Academy here on News Talk 1330, FM 106.3. We're also streaming live online at newstalk1330.com, and you can see us on the News Talk 1330 WLBB Facebook page this morning, where we see hundreds of you watching this morning. Appreciate the comments and the questions. I'm going to share some of those questions here in just a little bit. A compliment first. Thank you, Chief Joel Richards and Sheriff Langley, for all that you do for our community. Your leadership in the community has shown that we can all support one another and be one as a community. That's from Sarah Bearden. Doc Norton, so proud of our law enforcement officers in Carroll County, Carrollton, and surrounding towns. Also, this is a question from Facebook. A gentleman named Felix. As black men, we are afraid almost every time we encounter police officers. Our anxiety goes up every time we see you, and especially if you pull us over. Is there something that the chief and some of his officers could do to build a better rapport with the African-American men in the community so that we, too, might eventually reach a place where we feel safe because the police have arrived?
My suggestion would be come get to know us. I think it may be Felix Moten. We've talked about this. We do a CPA, Citizens Police Academy, in January through March every year, where you come in and spend time with us, get to know us. The sheriff does his in the fall. Chief Mansur does one also in Villa Rica. We do ride-alongs, come up and ride with the officers, get to know them, ask them questions, build that rapport with us. We do a lot of things in the community to build relationships, starting in the youth. We invest heavily in the youth, the sheriff and I do. We have a SNAP program, Special Neighbor Assistance Program, where we feed the elderly and take care of them. There's a number of things that we do already. We teach what used to be called verbal judo on a traffic stop. The first thing you do is you introduce yourself. Hello, my name's Officer Richards. The reason I stopped you is because you were speeding, you were doing this, I clocked you at this. Do you have any legitimate reason for doing that? That's exactly how we have officers that the supervisor required each month to review body cams of officers to make sure they're doing what we trained them to do and what the policy is.
Is it the preference for officers when anybody's pulled over? I mean, I've been doing this since the 90s, and I've been pulled over 50 times for things since I was a teenager driving. I've always put my hands up on the dashboard. I've put them out the window. Is that the right thing? I mean, does that worry officers?
I can tell you this. As I came here when I was 22. I've been here 28 years. My brother worked for Sheriff Langley for, I think, 30 years at the sheriff's office. And he taught me as he came in law enforcement in 87 when I was still in high school. He said, always put your hands on the steering wheel where an officer can see them. And I've done that ever since when I've been stopped. Because I get stopped also.
Now, James, James, I hope you can hear us as we're talking here. Did you hear the question that we presented from Felix?
No, I did not. Could you repeat that question?
Okay. Well, Felix suggested that almost every time we encounter police officers, our anxiety goes up every time we see, and especially if they pull African American men over. I mean, can you speak to that comment? I mean, is that discussed a lot within the NAACP?
Definitely. The NAACP, we hear a lot of complaints. Many times people will give us a call when they have a problem, when they encounter a problem. And I kind of like the quote that Pastor Dortch used a little while ago, right before you went to the break, where he says, being at the table. And I'd like to thank the Carrollton Police Department as well as Sheriff Langley and for allowing us to have a seat at the table, because here at the NAACP we have a slogan that's very similar, that if you're not at the table, then you're on the menu. And we definitely do not want to be on the menu. So anxiety goes up every time a person is pulled over, and especially when a person of color is pulled over, because you have a lot of things going through your mind, and so far, we've heard from the police officers, from Sheriff Langley, we heard from Chief Richards about the great things that the police department, the sheriff's department's doing here in the community, and what they're doing to reach out. And I think that's very good. We've got a good relationship where we can reach out to them, but there's an elephant in the room, and there's an elephant in the community that we haven't talked about yet, and that's what's causing all the problems that our nation is faced with across the country. You're seeing things happen, and the NAACP is heavily involved in all the different cities, because we have branches all across the country. And just for clarification, to make sure people know, the purpose of the NAACP, the mission of the NAACP, is to ensure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights for all people, and to eliminate racial hatred and to eliminate racial discrimination. And unfortunately, we're seeing racial discrimination take place in a lot of different areas, especially the areas that we've seen on the news. We can go to the beginning, go back to Rodney King back in the 90s. And you look at what happened there, and the brutality that African Americans have received on the hands of police officers, it's still happening. And we've got a generation of young people today who are tired, and they've heard be patient, be patient, be patient, and now they're ready for some serious and some meaningful actions to take place to stop this murder of innocent young black men.
Well, hopefully we are starting the conversation today. Hopefully we're beginning that conversation, and it goes a long way as far as communicating with our community and the individuals we have on the program this morning. Sounds like Pastor Dortch and yourself and Dominique are good liaisons to reach out to and start having this conversation, and local law enforcement as well. I appreciate everybody tuning in this morning for the program. It's about 8:54. We're going to take our final break. We may stretch the program out about 6 extra minutes this morning, but we will take our final break and come back and touch on some more topics within this wide topic. Community Voice brought to you by Tanner Health System and Oak Mountain Academy here on News Talk 1330, FM 106.3.
For more than 70 years, you have turned to Tanner Health System for your healthcare needs. As our community moves forward, Tanner is here for you. Strong, safe, and close to home. Routine medical appointments, urgent elective surgeries, and imaging are back on the calendar at our hospitals and Tanner Medical Group practices. With the safety of our patients, staff, and community always our top priority. Learn more at tanner.org. Hashtag We Are Tanner Strong. That's tanner.org. Hashtag We Are Tanner Strong.
At Oak Mountain Academy, our daily schedule includes convocation, prayer, and the Pledge of Allegiance. By doing so, we build a family-like community where all students grow and flourish and personal faith is encouraged. Through community service and a historical approach to biblical study, our students are taught the value of the warrior way, honesty, respect, and responsibility. Oak Mountain Academy. We are a family creating legacies. To learn more, visit oakmountain.us.
8:55. Welcome back to the Community Voice program here on News Talk 1330 FM 106.3. Also streaming live on the News Talk 1330 WLBB Facebook page. We do appreciate the comments and the conversation and the viewership this morning. Taking another question, a comment off of the Facebook page this morning. The pastor relationships are great, but we the people would like to have a direct dialogue with these authority figures and put our issues directly to them and have them answer our questions. This is from Carolyn Gray. Many of us do know her. I've been in Carroll County for 20 years, and I only heard of the luncheon a few months ago. Black women would like a seat at the table, not through someone else, but speaking for ourselves. Is that something that hasn't been considered? I mean, I guess to make sure the black women have a seat at this luncheon, in this conversation?
I would say it's been open for the public. I would say this, that for a form or a direct way of communicating with the officers, from my experience, the best way has been through the academy class, where you get a chance to sit for, I guess, about like 6 weeks. 11 weeks. And of those 11 weeks, they cover several topics where you would have that one-on-one dialogue with the officers to find out exactly what they're doing, and you get a chance to voice your questions. And that helped me by going through that Citizen Academy. So I would just suggest to anyone that wants that personal relationship or get a chance to voice your questions one-on-one with the officers, set up set up that class. And matter of fact, with Chief and Terry, is that it doesn't have to be just with the citizens. You can set up your own group. So if you have a group of African American women that want to go through it privately, they can do that, and that'll open up a good opportunity for them to be able to voice their opinion as a way of any concerned questions that they may have.
Okay, we're going to take this conversation over the 9 o'clock hour. We're going to skip over national news and local news, but we'll join Glenn Beck at 9:06. Want to I mean, we give everybody at least one last chance to do a closing comments. But let me ask the chief and sheriff one more question. But I want to give everybody the opportunity to have a closing comment. We did talk about the use of force. And you guys both condemned that in Minnesota. How do you train officers? How do you guys train your officers to use force?
Well, that's one of the first things that Pastor Dortch, I think, asked me is that something that you train here? And our policy actually says, and I said it last night at a Zoom meeting, I had the policy with me, is we ban the use of any kind of neck restraint. Our policy says you will not do anything at all to restrict anybody's ability to breathe. But some people call it chokeholds. Our policy is neck restraints are not authorized by our agency. The sheriff and I both are state-certified agencies through the Georgia Police Accreditation Coalition and the Georgia Association of Chiefs of Police, and it's like 114, 119 standards that we have to go by, and we have to prove that we do it every 3 years when they come in to recertify us. And that's one of the things that is banned. I can't imagine any agency in the nation that would authorize a neck restraint or a chokehold.
Only thing I have to add to that, it's true we are state certified, and that's great because we have those standards to go by. Not only do we, when we do use of force, we have to document and do an extra documentation on why the use of force, and then it's reviewed, and it's also open to open records. So we're transparent, and that's been a great thing for us being state certified. And I think there's is there a couple other agencies here? I know Villa Rica's state certified, so it's a standard to go by the use of force. So.
All right, it's 8:59. I want to ask one more question, then we'll give everybody that closing statement. It's not new for incidents with police officers to be recorded on cell phones and documented. Are police prepared for that? I mean, do they react different? Are they more uncomfortable? Are they nervous when they see that? Are they prepared that that's
I'm gonna say no, because we've been wearing body cams for years. Every officer in our agency is assigned a body cam. And our policy is when you get out of your car or you encounter any citizen for whatever, if you're given directions or a traffic stop, your body cam will be on, and it's subject to open records, and we're very transparent, as Pastor Dortz can tell you. There's been times when he's had family members come up and watch body cams with us. As a matter of fact, that's how we first met, was through a complaint that he came, and we, after lunch, I said, well, let's just come see it, how it actually went down.
They should be very aware that they're being taped, not only by our cameras and things that we have on them, but also, I mean, you just look at Facebook. If you look at it, everything is recorded now.
Cameras.
And so you might as well know that you're recorded, and I don't think they're nervous about it. They ought to be doing the right thing, whether there's a camera or not, and so I think that's how you have to go by that.
Again, this morning we did hope this could be the beginning of a bigger conversation, and I hope we have started a lot of things for people to think about and talk about in the coming weeks. I do want to close up right now with about 5 minutes left in the program. I'm going to start with Dominique Conte with the Carroll County NAACP.
Thank you, Colin. I just wanted to touch base really quickly before I do my closing statement about one of the questioners, the African-American woman, saying that basically she wants us to have a seat at the table. I think it's more of community-based. They want the law enforcement to come to their community. They don't want to have to seek out the law enforcement. And it needs to be more community policing as well. Because when I grew up, a lot of the police officers were from the neighborhood. They were more comfortable and at ease addressing whether it's a positive or a negative interaction with the citizen because they had a rapport. A lot of it is the unknown and fear for whatever reason that officers of a different race may have with minorities that's causing a lot of issues. It's spiraling out of control. Just a regular traffic stop or something very frivolous where someone ends up, usually the African American or another minority, severely hurt or injured or murdered. So community policing would be great, as well as, and it's great what the chief and the sheriff is saying as far as the other outlets that they have for the community to reach out to them. But in retrospect, we got to have the police reaching out and the sheriffs reaching out to the community, because a lot of the minority groups don't know about these programs like the pastor knows, and that they are just visual. And a lot of the young activists and organizers that Mr. Stocks is referencing, they don't know those outlets. They're looking at their neighborhood, they're looking at their community and not seeing the representation of diversity, as well as police officers and sheriffs coming into the community and getting and wanting to get to know them as a community, as neighbors, as fellow citizens. So if we could somehow negate that issue, I'm confident that a lot of unfortunate incidents like we've seen throughout the years, not just recently, would start to diminish, because there would be more of a comfort level. There's more of a familiarity. There's more of a rapport. Does that make sense what
Absolutely.
I'm saying?
Absolutely. But I do have 5 more questions with that, but we unfortunately don't have to.
I know, this is the first step.
It is the first step. I do appreciate you being here, and I'm gonna let that be your final word on that. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to pass it along to everybody for a final word, but we've got 2 minutes left in the show. Chief Richards, final word from you.
We actually have a COPS unit, community-oriented policing unit. Yesterday at lunch, myself, the deputy chief, Mario Potts, McDowell, Philip Ball, we were actually at Robert Hendricks Park grilling out hot dogs for a group of young kids that were doing football practice, football drills. Coach Terrell Walker and I don't remember who else, I don't believe anybody else was there, and asked us to come and hang out and talk to the kids, and just things like that we do. We just got finished over the past 6 weeks delivering 28 meals. Officers would every day. I actually delivered 8 myself every day to the elderly in our community, and that was through the Carroll County Council on Aging and Community Foundation of West Georgia.
And there's so much more we could have talked about today. I'm sorry to cut you guys off there.
Also, real quick, Regina Cleveland is our community advocate. She came to the sheriff and I a little over a year ago, and she's actually at the West Carrollton precinct in at Catherine Hardy Lavender Center on Willie North Street.
Hopefully we can do this again, and appreciate those who tuned in, and appreciate the panel for joining us this morning. And James, sorry you didn't get to talk more. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind, unfortunately. But we do appreciate your input, and appreciate our listeners and viewers this morning to the Friday edition of the Community Voice program. Time right now is 9:05. Glenn Beck program starts in about 1 minute here on the News Talk 1330 FM 106.3 Community Voice program. Have a great weekend, everybody.